Oh, I guess I should unmute myself. Welcome, everybody. Dr. Kraft.
Hold on. I can't. You stopped my video, it says.
I stopped your video. Uh-oh.
It says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Oh, my goodness. Boy, this is embarrassing, right?
We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. Yeah. Try that, maybe.
Oh, I think I'm coming on.
There we go.
There I am.
Co-host instead of panelist.
Yes.
There we go. How are you doing today?
I'm so good. How are you, Alex?
Very good. We haven't talked in a while, and I just miss you,
I know.
having
We
video
haven't talked in a
conferences.
while. I know. We haven't talked in a while. It's good to
No.
see you.
It's good to see you too. So I'm so excited for this webinar because, a lot of people are wondering about how esports is going to work. How does it work? What it is, right? And all of the things in between. So hopefully this can provide some clarity to those of the people that are going to be thank you for those of you giving up your Valentine's Day afternoon for coming to learn esports.
Such a special night.
A special night for esports. That's right. Esports is love language, I think, for some people.
Yes. So yes.
I think it ties in, right?
So true.
So again, thank you for everybody on here. And those of you that are watching today, once we post this on YouTube later this week, hopefully this will get you going for starting an esports program, whatever that looks like, whether you're looking to do it as a class, whether you're looking to do it as an after school program, supplemental, whatever you're looking to do. We encourage and want to support that in any fashion. My name is Alex Herbie, and I am the integrations manager for Generation Esports. I've been in this role since June, and I came from 10 years of teaching in the public schools sector, where I was a shop teacher and computer science teacher for those 10 years. So, luckily my room was split with a wall, so the computers in the shop were totally separate. But I started an esports program at my building the year before I left and saw great success with it. And we'll talk about that a little bit too. So with me today is the wonderful Dr. Kraft, Dr. Kristen Kraft. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and then we'll get going.
Yeah, so I'm Dr. Kristen Kraft. Just a little bit of background, kind of like Alex. I was in education for 27 years. I just realized that I have marker on my hand, which is very education-like, right?
I thought it was a tattoo at first.
Yeah, no, it's I was like, oh, well, this is fitting for today's educational webinar. But yeah, I was in basically middle and secondary. So that's really my expertise. I was high school and middle school principal, assistant principal, everything from an athletic director to, and then even district office for a while. Responsible for secondary schools in the state of Kansas. I've been kind of all over. So I've been with Generation Esports for about a year, and probably one of my favorite things to do is to talk to educators about putting something in that is totally innovative that works for kids, and we've got to be doing those things. So I hope I'm able to give a little bit of information today that will help you to move things forward. You're muted.
I know. I'm trying to be respectful because some people are doing work outside, and I want to make sure nobody can hear all that.
I can't hear anything.
Okay, good. Well, then I'll just keep it unmuted then.
Yeah.
So hopefully this is going to be something good for you guys. And I just want to throw out some, kind of housekeeping before we start. Dr. Kraft she's going to present with the slides. I'm going to run the slides, and I'm going to be running chat. So if you have any questions, please feel free. Go ahead and throw that in chat. If you don't have chat enabled, here it is. Okay, here it is. It should pop up if you don't have chat on. But go ahead and throw that in chat. Any questions, comments, concerns that you want to do, that's the easiest way for us to keep track of that. And we want this to be interactive. So we're going to start off real quick. How about those Chiefs, right?
Yes.
Go ahead and post in chat if you are a Chiefs fan.
Were you Chiefs? Were you Eagles? Were you Rihanna? I mean, sometimes it's just half. Were you commercials? There's a Chiefs. There's Sean said Chiefs.
All right, yay. Chiefs. Alan, well, boy, that's so nice of you. That's really great. Appreciate that.
Great.
Well, I can see the consensus obviously here is Chiefs. It must be. So we're just going to go with, we're just got a whole room of Chiefs fans. So
I like it.
awesome. Good. That means everything's working. That's our little test to make sure that things are working. So, all right. So Dr. Crass, let's take it
Yes.
away as soon as
Okay.
I switch this over here.
You're sharing my screens. I love that I don't have to do that.
You don't have to
yeah,
do
see,
nothing.
halftime, Allison. Yes, that's what that. See, sometimes Rihanna, sometimes the halftime show wins. Okay,
Sometimes
so
the halftime show wins. You're right.
that's right. Yeah. So okay, well, we can flip through that. That's me. There I am.
All right. And I thought the video was good. I watched it earlier. It's up to you.
Does it work on here then?
We just began a program called Esports. It's a program where young men and women compete as teams.
Okay, wasn't there another slide that I added before that or not?
Let me refresh.
Yeah, refresh.
Okay, here we go.
Okay.
There we go.
All right,
Sorry,
there we go.
everybody.
Much better. No, that's okay. I was like, I don't think I hit that right away, but that's good. So we did that. Okay, so just kind of want to overview kind of what we're going to do here on the webinar. And how much time do I have, Alex?
You've got roughly about 45 minutes.
Okay, perfect. We're going to do just kind of a brief overview about what esports is. Some people really just have kind of limited knowledge on it. And so that's why I think these webinars can be so beneficial. I had limited knowledge until I really dove into what it was all about, how it can really benefit students in schools, how students can be impacted post-secondary. That's a big buzzword that we talk about in education, how we can really integrate with esports and like CTE and then courses, talking just briefly about student privacy, because I know that's always a concern, and then a little bit about our gaming concept, which is a digital resource that can be used as a course, as well as with esports clubs, and then I'll talk to you about some funding options. So hopefully this kind of gives you a little overview about what we're going to do. So again, this is going to be a little interactive as well. And so if you want to put these comments in the chat,
there we go.
We're going to take a little quiz. And so we'll just start with number one. And, do you think that esports is the fastest growing sport? Would that be true or false to you? And, Alex, you can kind of tell me what's happening in the chat.
Okay, I got a true.
Okay, yeah.
3 trues here.
Got 3 trues. Okay, so definitely on the true, it is true, and we'll go over some of these answers as well. So what percentage of teens do you think are playing games between the ages of 12 and 18?
Ooh.
85. Some people might be like, I have no idea.
I got a 96 and I got an 85.
Okay.
Brave souls
right.
to throw most.
90.
There you go.
Okay.
A 90. Most. I like the most.
All right. And we'll give you the answers to these here in just a minute, but you might want to write this down maybe on a little piece of paper somewhere, or just tell me what you think the top 2 are.
Top 2, that's right.
Yeah. So rank in order who you think has the most viewers: NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, MLS, and esports.
This is a good one.
Top 2, top 3.
Well, I'm going to guess. I don't know this one actually. I think I'm going to guess the NFL and the MLB.
Okay, NFL and MLB. Okay.
Football, baseball. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, we just had a huge Super Bowl last night, right?
Right.
So we know a lot of people are watching the NFL. So, okay. Well, we'll show that here in just a minute.
Yeah.
And then question 4 is college recruiting provided how many millions of dollars in esports scholarships last year? What do you think? Put that in the chat. A couple of answers.
Ooh, we got a 20 million, 6 million. Good guesses.
5 is how many colleges are offering esports programs?
Nearly, well, Allison, I'm not sure, Allison, that could be 50 million or it could be 50 colleges offering esports scholarships.
Million.
Hard to say.
I like it.
Colleges, there you go, 50 colleges.
50 colleges, okay. 200.
200 colleges, yeah. Okay, last
And then
one.
true or false, there's an overwhelming research that shows a direct link between gaming and increased student violence. Is that
Ooh,
true
that's
or
a good
false?
one.
False, false.
Yeah, seen lots
Okay.
of false.
Difference between D1, D2. Okay.
That's a good question.
Good question. All righty. Go to the next screen.
Here we go. See who won.
Okay. Yeah. So there's your answers. And we'll talk a little bit more specifically about some of those. And I'm going to give you some interesting links and things so that as you're kind of moving forward with whatever it is that you're trying to do with your esports in your schools or districts, that you will have some information to carry forward. So, okay, move on to the next one. Let's look at that ranking on the next slide. So you'll notice here in viewership, and this is actually outdated information. So we're probably seeing an increase in the esports. It's probably, if it's not yet at the NFL status, that it is going to surpass NFL in viewership. So if you had put anything but esports second, then you were wrong. But that is something that is very telling. I think that, you know, I always say that esports is really kind of the best kept secret in education. And I think this is a very good way of saying yes, because we know that in our schools, do we have football teams? Yes. Do we have baseball teams? Do we have basketball teams? Do we even have hockey teams in our schools? Yes. And then even soccer. But where's esports? Where's esports in our schools when we know that that's something that is being viewed on, you know, a global scale? So, and this is just the United States. One thing that I wanted to just kind of put out there too is I think sometimes when we're talking about esports, we start to think of it as, you know, is it an activity? Is it a club? Is it a sport? And I think there's a number of different ways that you can implement it within your school. And so I always like to kind of present this definition of what a sport is. And it's really just, you know, any athletic activity that requires skill or physical prowess. And so when we think about something like racing or hunting and fishing, those are all considered sports. But I'm not sure that everybody would say that's a sport just based on the activity that you're doing. So really it defines sport as an activity involving physical exertion and skill in which an individual or a team competes against one another for entertainment, which that is esports. Again, it's not necessarily normalized in education. It's not normalized within our buildings. And so one of the things that I, you know, really want to make sure we do, as well as our Scrabble, exactly, you know, that we want to do here with, you know, Generation Esports and gaming concepts, is we really want to normalize esports in school. So good definition there for you, retrieved from Forbes. Just to give a little bit of background on esports, because I think sometimes people are just kind of unsure of what exactly it is. And let me adjust my footing here. Esports versus video games. So when you're talking about esports, you're talking about competition and competitive video gaming. So you're going to have a player versus a player. You're going to have a team versus a team. And then your goal is really to outsmart or outplay your opponent to get to the victory. So if you really kind of think about it in a way from like a track and field perspective, or, you know, a marching band perspective, this is kind of the types of things that, and let's kind of talk about those two things. Track and field is really about a bunch of events where kids are competing. And it's the same thing when you're working with esports. So you might have a number of different games that kids are involved in, say like League of Legends, Rocket League, Valorant, and those are considered like the events that you might have at a track meet. The change or the difference is that you're not just going to do those things on one day, you're going to do those things throughout the week. And then as far as like thinking about it from a marching band perspective, it's really, you know, we know a lot of our high schools have marching band first hour, middle schools as well. And all of the skills that they are learning within marching band aren't necessarily because they're going to become professional trombone players, but there's a bunch of skill sets that they're learning within marching band, plus they're finding a peer group. And so you can really start to look at esports as the way to give them access to their peer groups and and organize it in a way that we organize it like a track meet. So just to say video games in general can sometimes have kind of a negative view, or, what's the word I'm looking for? Perception in our schools. And so I think it's really important to kind of distinguish, what is esports and what is the difference. So there's that competitive nature. There are some common genres within esports. Those would be, something that's done in real time. There's real-time strategy. There's first-person elimination. We hear often from schools when we're talking to them that we can't have any first-person shooter games. We like to use the word elimination because really if you start to really understand and get to know esports, whatever it is that they're using to eliminate a player really has little to do with the objective and the outcome of the game. And so oftentimes, if there is a gun, it could be just as easily as replaced with a snowball, because that's really not the entire picture of what they're doing to engage with one another. So elimination is a much better word. There's lots of sports simulation, Madden. What are the others? Like I'm thinking NBA 2K. What is it? I'm blanking on
NBA 2K.
Yes, NBA 2K, things of like that nature. So there you go. That's right, NBA 2K. And then there's multiplayer online battle arenas. So you've got, groups of 3 or 5 team players playing against each other online at the same time, and you're able to watch that live. As far as esports teams versus gaming club, I think that's something to really consider. I think a lot of times when you're in schools, the first thing that's going to come about is a kid's going to ask a teacher, hey, would you sponsor a gaming club? And that wonderful teacher, out of the goodness of their hearts, they love kids, says, absolutely. And so when you have a gaming club, you're really just about casual, very social play. And oftentimes that's how it might start in a building. And then you might transition to the esports team. So that esports team is going to have that competition, that teamwork. You're going to have more organized practices, more structure around your practices. And college are looking for the esports athlete versus gaming club people. So there's a place for both. It's not an either, it's not an either or, it's an and, it's a win-win. So that's kind of the difference between those two things. How are we doing in the chat?
We're doing great.
Great. So do you want to play this quick video for me? This is actually really quick just to set this up. This is Fresno Unified superintendent talking about esports competition.
We just began a program called Esports. It's a program where young men and women compete as teams in an online gaming environment, representing their respective high schools. It's quite literally the competition venue of the future. If you don't believe me, go talk to young people in your life playing games like Fortnite or League of Legends. The viewership of these online tournaments is outpaced already the World Series and the NBA and NHL finals, and is rapidly closing in on the Super Bowl. If you don't know about it yet, you might want to Google something. These things matter to kids, and you might ask, why would we head down this road as a school system? Video games? Because now our because Boise State has a scholarship for these programs, and other schools do too. But moreover, now our kids, many of whom have not participated in any other engagement initiative, are representing their own home high schools playing Rocket League. It's a game in which tricked out futuristic vehicles actually play soccer in an online team environment. Our scrimmages started last week. One of the kids said, and I quote, "This is the best thing that has ever happened to me at school."
So as you can see, this is from 2018, and here we are in 2023, and we still have not normalized it. And oftentimes I will talk to, and I'm a former principal and administrator, and I will talk to a lot of educators, leadership, and they really just want nothing to do with it. And really it's up to us to educate the masses, to help them understand that this is actually good for kids. The pictures here on this slide are actually from a school in Connecticut. One kid was so excited that he got his letter jacket for Griswold Esports. I've made a note to myself, I need to get a hold of Jostens and all those places that do letter jackets and say, okay, so where are the gamer patches that we can get? So very exciting to see what they did for the kids when they won a championship. They had a pep assembly, just like any other school would do. I have another school, I can't think of where they're out of, but when they win a state championship, they actually get their name on a highway sign. That's just part of their high school protocol when they win a state championship, and they've got some esports champions and their signs are right there on the highway. So this should be celebrated. This should be done in the schools just like everything else that we celebrate in schools, because these kids, matter as well.
We just began a program called Esports.
So why are esports a good fit for schools? So when you think about it from learning and practice and competing, so if they're learning within an esports avenue, they can take courses, which I'll talk about a little later. Those can be actually embedded within the school day. It's about hooking them to get them engaged in their learning. So this can show an improvement in attendance. You stick an esports course in first hour of the day, and you're going to see attendance improve dramatically. As far as practicing, students really need that why to come to school. I've often heard things like, why does anybody care if I'm here? If I'm not coming, where are my friendships? What do I have a connection with? And so this is your students' why. This becomes part of their mental health, that they start to make those connections. We hear it all the time. I think Alex, you have one of the best stories ever of the most popular football player in school who made friends with the kid that really didn't talk, that nobody knew. And that shy, kind of withdrawn student was actually the leader in the classroom because everybody wanted to be as good as him at a certain game, including the captain of the football team. And they actually formed a friendship even off campus. And so you'll hear of these a lot when it comes to just giving kids that connection to school. And then competing against each other. Students do want to play against each other. This is important for a lot of them. And so you're really increasing the engagement. You're giving them a success at school. And so when they see success at school, they're very linear in their thinking. Well, video games are at school. I'm successful at video games, so I must be now successful at school. So it's a great fit for schools. Here are some of these are just a few, but just to think about from just benefits of teamwork. Benefits of esports. I've listed a list of 11 here. There's probably much more that we could add to this list, but esports is really all about teamwork. It's about a physical health and wellness. Yes, we do want esports students who are, athletes to be understanding of nutrition and, even addiction in their world. Getting into the gym, gamer stretches, different things like that. There's a mental mindfulness that comes with esports. There's neurodivergent success. We see a lot of students with on the spectrum that have tons of success with esports. They may not be socially excited to be around people, but when they're in their esports world, they are champions. You're going to have a lot of digital citizenship because students do, when you start to put this in schools, especially, we're using something that's real and authentic to students. And so we're providing an avenue to teach them behaviors for digital citizenship that is relevant to them. And that's why we want to bring it into a school, because you're going to give it that structure that it needs instead of just being at home. They have lots of leadership opportunities, which I'll talk about a little bit later. There's emotional growth and well-being for them. It's one of the most diverse and inclusive things to put into your school. Esports doesn't have genders. Esports doesn't have locker rooms. Esports can allow kids in it that don't have a working hand or a working leg. So there's lots of ways to get students involved in this. The 4 Cs, which is very another kind of buzzword in education right now, but all that communication, creativity, collaboration, and connection, that's all a part of esports, as well as the millions of dollars in scholarships and all of the post-secondary success that they can have just by going into the industry.
And Kristen, I just want to say that esports as a whole is probably the most, if not one of the most inclusive sports that can happen, or sports or activities, however you want to view it, right?
Yeah.
The amount of technology and innovation that goes into even Microsoft's new adaptive controllers, right? On being able to build on their site a controller that works for you for your different abilities is so awesome that you can't change a football you know,
Nope.
so that you can grip it, right? You know, for somebody that might have difficulty gripping something. So just an amazing field to have that inclusivity.
Absolutely. I love it. So just a couple of little bites of information and data that we've collected along the way as we've worked with schools. One of our biggest partners, I'm here in Wichita, Kansas, and Wichita USD 259 is a very large district. It's one of the largest in the state of Kansas. This is one of the high schools. And just to kind of give you an idea of like who was participating, there were, 92 esports participating, which also included, 60 athletes. Those were the esports athletes. They had 6 shoutcasters, 26 event managers, and workers. So they weren't just involved in esports because they wanted to play the games. They were involved in it because of the entire esports ecosystem, which we'll kind of go into a little bit here too. Again, these are some statistics that I love to share as well. But at Wichita Southeast, one of the things that we always want to work on is obviously getting more females, students of color. So they did have 89% male participants. And so one of the things that I think is really great is when you start to put it into schools from an educational perspective by adding in courses, by putting them in different pathways, you're going to start to see more girls becoming a part of that. And there's even research to show that girls that go into esports are more likely to go into STEM careers. So I think it's really important that as we're creating these esports pipelines, that we're really considering how we're making that academic, because it's a lot easier for, say, a female to go and take a class to see what it's all about than they are maybe to go to an after school program where they're maybe unsure or there's been some type of toxicity around it in their world. 80% of the students within Wichita Southeast program were not involved in anything else. No activities or clubs. We find this across the board, anywhere from 10 to 30% of the students, as far as like your total school population, are just not involved in anything and haven't been. Even so much as a spelling bee, they haven't done any of those things. And this is the first time they actually become engaged. 70% of his students, and I bring this up specifically because they were failing one or more class. And reality was they were failing a lot of classes, if not all. And I hear lots of times principals or the coaches say, I'm going to have tryouts or I'm going to cut. And if they're failing, they can't be on it. And I love the coach's perspective on this, was he said, give them all to me and let's get them in there. And then he would do like a little bit of an increase of, hey, in 2 weeks, I need you all to be passing. And then he just kept setting more boundary, he just kept setting the standards. Hey, let's all see if we can get to C's, or we're passing, all but 3 of our classes. And he just kept working with those students to where at the very end of the semester, all of those kids were passing. And so I think it's really important to consider that a lot of times why kids are failing and why kids are failing multiple classes is because, once again, there's zero connection to school. So great. I see Todd's question about grade requirements. Grade requirements are really up to the school and what they decide to do. But I have noticed that in my discussions with principals and leaders across the country, I almost cringe when I hear them say, I'm not going to allow anybody that's failing classes in. And I think, no, those are the kids you kind of need to start getting in there to see if you can improve the success with that. So again, I've just included kind of what maybe an esports practice would look like. This is actually Compton Unified School District. You can see how awesome their whole setup is. It's just amazing. They are a school that, did some grants and we're able to get some state-of-the-art equipment. It's just a really cool place for the kids to be. It's all about, how it vibe. And so what they are doing is in their practices is they're reviewing game video, and they're strategizing their gameplay, which is just like any other sport that you would be at a practice. They're really helping to improve their mindset and their motivation. It's real easy to get down, to not persevere, to get angry. So they're working with them on those anger management tools, all kinds of things. And then just that physical and mental health training and making sure that they're taking care of themselves first and not letting the game, wreak havoc on their physical and mental health, because it's important that we're not just sitting around all day. So, Alex, how we doing?
We're doing great. We're having a great side chat here in the.
Well,
in
tell
the
me
chat.
a little bit in the chat. Just
Yeah. So I'm just trying to see. Todd brought up the grade requirement, right? So some schools will do that. We can talk about that for a second. Some schools will do that with the grade requirement. It's like similar to eligibility, right?
Right.
But I think that's a good piece for the competitive side, right? Versus going to do an esports after school thing, or going to esports, if you have a class during the day, then those shouldn't be negated based on your grades, because you're always going to go to science during the day. You're always going to go to music during the day, despite your grades. So I think that's an individual choice for that. And then Allison brought up a really good thing about, but what about behavioral issues in participation? And I just shared that when I was teaching, we always looked at the individual student's willingness to improve, right? So if we're seeing improvement in the office and we're seeing improvement in behavior issues, then I think that is something that we can work together on. It doesn't have to be, black and white so much of the time. So I think there's I'm sure that we could spend the rest of the hour just talking about those.
Oh,
issues,
for sure.
Those are really good.
Well, and I know like
conversation starters.
Dr. Jensen talks about when, he's the one that did the mental health study that I'll refer to here in a little bit, but, he talked about when he went into the classroom, he was very much against screen time. And then he noticed that in the esports class or the esports program after school, that a lot of these kids were on the at-risk list, and that could have been for grades or behavior. And what he saw was emerging leaders and kids not on their cell phones. And I think oftentimes when kids are not connected to school in any capacity, that is when they become behavior problems, especially if you don't have a good elective selection. I know as a high school and middle school principal, if I didn't have good electives, then it would also like kind of overflow in the class, because the kids have to go somewhere. And so we would have kids going into electives where they absolutely hated it. And that's when they become behavior problems. So, what are we providing for all kids that makes sense to them? And again, when you look at places like a Wichita or a Compton or things like that, this ends up being one of the more popular classes if you end up doing that as a course. And again, just talking about that support in schools, I think it's really important not only to kind of celebrate their successes, but as you kind of think long-term, I definitely think that technology, don't be scared if you don't have a lot of technology yet. Those things can come in time, and there's lots of ways that we can help with how to get a program just started and just get started with a few things. But eventually, I firmly believe that every time you're building a new school building, you should probably make sure you have an esports lab. And I think that is starting to kind of be talked about just among like furniture or equipment providers. But there's a whole vibe, there's a whole ambiance. We've gone away from that computer lab in the schools and because of one-to-one. And I say, bring that lab back and make it an esports lab, because it's just as important to these kids as it is to have a basketball court for basketball players and a soccer field for the soccer players. And for what you can, do, it's actually very cost effective compared to what we're doing for everything else that we have normalized in school so far.
Right. I'd like to see a school district spend $1 million like they would on a football field for an esports lab.
Yeah, because it doesn't cost $1 million to do an esports lab. So,
no.
So again, one of the really big things, one of the benefits I talked about a little bit earlier is scholarships. And we talked about, the number of colleges that are recruiting. I think what is really interesting about this is that even though there's 25 million in scholarships to be handed out, there's about 5 to 8 million that's actually never used. This is a viable path for kids to go to college. And again, I go back to, because this is not in schools, they don't have enough kids to pick from for those scholarships. And I also hear, just in talking to collegiate coaches, again, you might have a club, you might have just some esports, some kids playing games, and that might be the only kids that maybe a school is looking at the collegiate level. And the kid will get there and the coach will have the kid, and they find out that's not the good match. They don't want just the kids who are doing it for fun, there's gaming clubs on every college campus too. And that may be the better placement for them. But when we're really talking about an esports athlete, we really want to raise that bar, and we just don't have enough teams and schools to be providing that. This happens to be that Wichita Southeast School. When they started their very first year, they earned over $65,000 in scholarships. These are two of, one actually is a player. The girl that's behind him was a manager. They both received scholarships to Wichita State, and that's their coach on the far end there. He used to be a professional player actually, but both of these students had zero desire to go to college. And this just opened up a path for them they weren't even thinking about. So it's really viable in the sense that a lot of kids, the only way they can get to college is by playing a sport or by scoring a 36 on the ACT. This is the only other viable way for them to get a really good scholarship is through esports.
And Allison brought up a great comment there, is that even managers can get scholarships. Yes.
Yes.
We have heard stories across the country of, because a college team needs a manager. Like, they need managers.
Absolutely.
And so if there's an effective manager that can keep that team in line, keep things orderly, keep things organized, then yeah, they're going to be an asset to the team. The same with shoutcasters and streamers. Like, the technical components of an esports match or esports tournament, people need those things, and colleges do not want to always pay for that, as a third party service, or rope in some other department. They want it all to be done in-house, that this is our streamer, they know the players well enough that they can do it, and scholarships can be given out for a lot of stuff.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about that too. So college signings, again, treating this like any other thing. This happens to be a student, again, also out of the Wichita area. His name's Lakin, and he played with May South High. It is a really big deal there to have esports, and he actually signed with Oklahoma University last fall. So it's been really fun to see him. He's got a great story. He actually wrote a blog for us on our Gaming Concepts blog. So if you want to hear from a student specifically, I think that's a great, maybe you could link that into the chat or something.
And he'll be on our podcast this week.
Yeah,
so.
Awesome. So a couple other things that you can, I'm still learning stuff, but one of the things that I recently learned about I knew about some of these organizations, but when you're, if people are like, oh no, they're not doing that, they don't have scholarships. There is one of my favorite things on here is the Stay Plugged In website. And when you click on that, you're going to be able to see all the colleges that are offering scholarships. And so that can be something that your students can look into and find where they might want to go. And then the games that they kind of are experts in, the ones that they are, trying to get students to play. So that's really helpful. There's the NCSA, College Recruiting, Varsity Esports Foundation has a lot of information there. GeoScore and NACE, those are all some other places you can look. But I really thought that Stay Plugged In was pretty cool. So I wanted to make sure that I shared that with everybody today. We know that as we talked about with it growing in viewership, we know that it is already $1 billion industry. It's projected to be almost $7 billion by 2027. So from that, go to the next slide for me. We know that we want to create those jobs, and the industry is so huge. It's not just about becoming an esports athlete that's professional. They're not going to be a professional athlete anymore. They're going to be a professional NFL player. But the ecosystem and the career connections that can come from your players getting involved. So what you'll see, of course, we created a graphic organizer because we're educators and we love those. But what you'll see is the different jobs that are out there. And then when you start to create this esports world in your school, you're gonna start involving more than just players. So you're gonna start getting students that want to design the jerseys. You are going to have students that want to do all the social media and share the scores and engage your community. So there's going to be this whole entire ecosystem that gets created just by you putting this into your schools as well. And I talk a little bit more about this in the next few slides, Alex. So again, what you'll see is again those leadership opportunities kind of come into fruition. A coach versus a general manager. So again, you might hire a coach that is for your esports program. You might hire a manager. A student can be the manager for you to help you to organize everything. As far as the coach, sometimes it's difficult to find people who know much about it. So perhaps one of your students could become the coach as well. You can look at local universities that might be around you, or tech colleges or whoever, and see if there's a student there that might want to help to volunteer. There are lots of those students who would like to go on to coach at the collegiate level, and this gives them some experience. So I think there's a number of ways that you can pull in student leadership, as well as any connections with your community around. Again, for student leaders, you could actually, for your club, you can have a president, you can have a vice president, you can have your social media, you can have your team captain, and then you can have the people that are part of those game experts. And maybe Alex can talk to that a little bit, but I think you definitely saw the game experts and some things come out of that from the leadership roles that came out of your classroom even.
Yeah, and I think that's where you can really split. Allison mentioned before about I want a casual space where we can have competitive and casual all together. This is great. This is where it's at, because that team captain and game expert, those people on the right of this graphic, those kids, those can be your competitive players, and they are hardcore about game and mechanics and memorizing every map and all that stuff. While the left half can be more casual. They're posting pictures, they're taking pictures and posting things on social media already, probably in the room.
Yeah.
So why not one of them be their social media manager for the team, or for your club, or for your program, as well as president or vice president. They can be your
public speaker,
public speaker, your kid that's good at debate, or good at is in NHS and wants to do organizational stuff. Like, they want to help to they want to be in control and wrangle everybody together, and let's do a team building activity, and so something like that. So I think that can be where you can really split these kids on kids that want a hardcore game and do the mechanics and the drills and the grind of it, would be your competition side. And then some of the support structure can be facilitated by those kids that can do that, the casual side. And Allison just mentioned, can we have more than one team, like a Val team and a Fort? Absolutely. Now, a caution to you is that the more teams you add, the more stress it adds. So, starting
bandwidth.
Your own bandwidth, right? So if you want, our recommendation always is to start with one, especially on the competitive side. Now, if you're just going to do casually, sure, let all the kids play whatever games they want, right? Your district's going to let you do. But in terms of competition, and other experts will tell you this too, if you're just starting out with esports competitive, one team would be great, maybe two. It just is a rule of thumb until you get things going with how tournament systems work, rostering, and all that.
Absolutely. I did include just some pictures, because I think sometimes, again, as you're moving forward with whatever it is you're trying to do for your esports, they can't really, I'm one of those people that has to see it to understand it from the educator's perspective. And, this is what your shoutcasters look like, your broadcasters. They're doing color and analyst, just like they would on a college Saturday. The amount of event planning that goes into this, this was all taken when I went to a Halo World Championship that was in downtown Kansas City. The marketing alone was all throughout the downtown Kansas City. Those are jobs. Those are things that people can be a part of. I'm not a gamer, but I'm in esports, and I'm in the education of esports. We got to have a little tour behind the scenes, and there was an entire cybersecurity group, because these are some of the places that cyber attacks they want to happen, right? And then just all your vendors and the design and the t-shirt designers and the sponsors and all of those things. Those are all jobs that are created. So I wanted to share just actual. So really, if you think about it, like for every person that's in front of the camera, there's probably 60 to 80 jobs behind that camera. Again, if you were to go and looked at any of these things and typed in esports, you would be able to find a ton of jobs around the esports industry. So it's just one way to kind of see what's out there, what jobs are out there. A great way, even if you're teaching a college and career readiness, Or if you're talking to your board about your portrait of a graduate, look at all the jobs that I can find just if I go into any of these around esports. Moving on. As far as if you want to start really making this academic and part of the learning and part of the day, we can really start to integrate like CTE within your esports. Anything dealing with event production, shoutcasting, video production, kind of Alex started this a little bit, earlier. He started to kind of mention these things, but that business management, lawyers are going to be a part of stuff, but audio engineering, IT networking, social media, health and wellness, game design, all of that is in CTE pathways. Move to the next slide. So here's some of your connections and what would be some of the classes that they would need. So if you're looking at like event production, you would have some type of project management. Shoutcasting, that can be in the form of a speech class. Video production and streaming can be in the form of a multimedia class. Business management can go into your business class. All of these would have esports as a hook and can make that connection very easily, and it becomes much more authentic and relevant because, again, we know 97% of teenagers are playing video games. So we're just using the hook of these things to make sure that we can connect them. Something that is definitely on the top of people's minds in education is just really that privacy and just making sure that you're COPA and COPA compliant. So any student for our company in particular, but we really make sure that anything is deleted. We don't want any access to student data in any way. Middle schoolers, oftentimes they start in middle school with us doing some competitive gaming, and we make sure that they are anonymous accounts. They go through usually a parental account, but we do make sure that we are compliant in those things. We don't want to own the data. That's all your data. And we make sure that we are abiding by all of the things that we know is important to educators and privacy laws. So just quickly, I know we don't have much time, but just to kind of talk briefly about gaming concepts, if we're starting to look kind of even academically. So we've talked about kind of esports competitively. Gaming concepts was actually designed by Mike and Christy, so Dr. Russell and Dr. Custer. It was in a alternative high school, and they were looking for ways to engage their students. And Mike was actually a gamer, and Christy is not. And the two of them formed, she's a great curriculum writer, and they started with gaming concepts. As they were seeing success with it, Chris Jensen also came on board. He is a former ER doctor turned science teacher, and also is now a national mental health consultant. And he really saw Michael Russell is the goat. Yes, they are. These are three goats right here for sure. But he really had a huge no to screen time, but purposeful play, if you can use that term, is very different from screen time. And so he helped with writing the mental health moments. And so out of that, we got gaming concepts. So go to the next slide. And when Mike taught gaming concepts the first time, in the class, first hour, again, he took some data. This ended up being part of his dissertation, but 96% is what their attendance rate became. It went from 86 to 96% because they put it in first hour of the day. It's genius. Again, he had 90% of his students had never been involved in anything else. And then once they were getting to school and they had that connection, of course, you're going to see an improvement in their grades. And in his case, with his kids, they showed a 1.7 GPA improvement. Going to the next slide, I'll show you a little bit more data. Or actually, I'm going to start with the standards. So again, I'm not going to go into a lot of this, but going back to those benefits, when you start to make it academic, are they going to have access to this presentation,
Yeah.
Alex? Okay.
Yeah, if you're on here right now, this will get emailed to you. Yes.
Okay. So the standards alignment, when you click on that, it's underlined. It's like 19 pages of all the standards that we're aligned to. And we've aligned to national standards, whether it's CASEL standards, the national health standards. We've aligned it to the ISTE standards, the Computer Science Teachers Association standards. Am I missing any others, Alex, for national standards?
I think you got it.
Okay, and Alex
a
put
lot.
together that 19-page document. So hail to thee, Alex. But again, I think that's one of the first questions we get when we're trying to implement something in our school. Well, what standards does it align to? So we wanted to make sure that we did all the work so that you all don't have to. This is the study that we did last spring that Dr. Chris Jensen actually led. He worked with over 500 middle school and high school students, 6 through 12. What he did was he had half of the group, half of the people had the mental health moments that we have embedded in our gaming concept, and then half the group did not. They were a control group. He really wanted to focus on a numerical number, so he used something called the Rosenberg scale of self-esteem so that he could give it a quantifiable metric. And then we honed in on what the CDC said were the cohorts that were really at risk for poor mental health, and that was students of color, LGBTQ community, and females. And so just in 10 weeks, this is the percentages that we saw these students rise in their self-esteem. So this is actually looking at their self-esteem and their self-efficacy. That's what this scale does. And so I think this is pretty telling when you're taking kids from abnormally low ranges of self-esteem to more normal ranges of self-esteem. You are actually helping to pull them out of those at-risk behaviors. So the numbers are the data and the findings is pretty incredible. And this is also something that's embedded within our gaming concepts courses that then opens up some funding for you as well, which I'll talk about. So we have a couple of different courses, just to briefly give you an overview, but we have a level 1 course for the high school that is a gaming concept. It's a foundational course. It can be taught by anybody. It is about 80 lessons. It's about a half a credit. It can be an actual elective course. It can be used as a resource for your computer science class. It can be used as a resource for maybe small groups for SEL. I've got one district where they're using it in the school-wide for their SEL time, and they're using the hook of esports to teach the concept. I have one school that doesn't even have any technology, and they're just using games of strategy and still teaching the same concepts within it. We have a level 2 course that is at the high school level. This one is very robust. It's got 160 lessons. It's in the technical level of that web and digital communication pathway. It has to be taught by an approved pathway teacher. Usually that's a business teacher, depending on the state that you're in. But again, even if you're teaching a multimedia or a digital media course, a Photoshop Elements course, you can use these resources and you never even have to have approval yet. It's only when you change the name of a course that you have to get approval from your board, or you have to align it to, the course codes. But you can use this as a resource. It's no different than buying lessons off teachers pay teachers, but you can be assured that we've aligned it to standards appropriately. There's a middle school course that we're really excited about that is aligned to, it's very SEL related. It's aligned to those national CASEL standards. It's really going to help students to get prepared for high school. It's about 80 lessons. Again, I think it makes a great elective because in middle school, oftentimes the only elective they have is choir or band or art. And that's not always what they want to take. And so you stick this in as an elective and boom, you're good to go. So next slide. And here's some future courses. So we are going to have a streaming course. It's not out yet, but it is going to be any day, hopefully, right? Fingers crossed. But this is going to be for speech credit. So this one is a high school level, and it is so that your students can get a speech credit. Every kid hates to take speech, but they have to take it to graduate. And it's amazing what kids will do when they can do streaming, where they're talking maybe to, the video camera or online. And then what that does is that actually pulls them to be good public speakers in the future, because then they get a confidence around it. And so I have seen kids, I just saw one recently in December, and he had a stuttering issue and never spoke in front of anybody, started being the streamer for his esports program, and he spoke to 100 educators in a room. It was the coolest story. Shoutcasting is going to be for a broadcast credit. So it will be taught in that, usually that business department. And then eventually we'll have hopefully a cybersecurity in esports, because we know oftentimes kids go into a cybersecurity class. It's not usually very fun. It's not engaging for them. And we know that we have a lot of jobs out there in cybersecurity, and this would be a great way to hook those students. So those are just a sampling of our courses. Moving on, these are some ways you can use it. Like I said, you can start just by using the gaming concepts with your after school program, because it's going to provide structure. A lot of people don't know how to give structure when they want to kind of up the ante a little bit. And this is going to give you, you can use lessons with your students after school with your esports program. It's going to teach them digital citizenship. It's going to be preventative mental health. You can supplement it into classes that are already being taught. We have health teachers using it. It's open for anybody. You can embed it into a CTE pathway eventually. You can create an elective course or a business course. And then you can also work with your local college or university, because, for example, our level 2 is actually for a college credit. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see where WSU Tech has actually been working with us, and they provide dual or concurrent credit for students that take that level 2 course. And WSU Tech was smart in doing this because, one, they have a great esports program, and two, they have a lot of certifications they want kids to go into.
Yeah.
And then they're also talking about partnering with us with the speech credit. So the it wasn't the shoutcast. Is it the shoutcasting? Streaming. It's the streaming. Yeah.
Streaming.
So they want to be able to provide streaming as a dual credit as well, because sometimes kids take collegiate speech. They want to do the same for our streaming class. So you can work with your local universities. As far as opening up funding, when, a lot of times I have people say, I want to start an esports program. I want to play video games after school with my kids. That's not really something people fund, and they don't want to. They want to have the background of what I gave you today, because we have something that can be used with both your program or scholastically. You actually open up funding in the mental health avenue, because ESSER funding is that emergency funding that we got by the state. When you use it for a mental health service or support, we have lots of schools who are funding this entire program or their classes through ESSER funds, as well as even doing esports labs through ESSER funds.
Yeah.
So this is the time that schools have more money than ever. So if it's not spent, this is a great way to spend it. We've included a video there for you. We've also included a link so you can see what your ESSER funding is by your state. But it was the ESSER 2 to ESSER 3 was actually doubled. So that has to be spent by the end of September 30th.
Good question there, Todd.
ESSER funding does run out
September
30th. So we have a lot of places getting 3- and 5-year deals so that they can have some longevity, with their program, and then eventually they can fund it. Because that's the thing, like some people fund esports through their athletic program. Some people fund esports through their activity program. Some people will then fund esports through their curriculum, because you're pulling in maybe a gaming concepts curriculum, but you can start to fund it through your CTE, your Perkins money.
Mm-hmm.
There's tons of STEM grants. All you have to do is give the information that we shared with you here today. You're probably going to get a STEM grant or a CTE grant or something. We just had a big school up in Connecticut, and they had written a huge grant with the Gates Foundation, and they're buying it for their entire school, like all their high schools and middle schools.
So if you have a grant writer on staff in your district, get them on this, because you can secure a lot of funding for it.
A lot of funding.
Of funding, and because there's no reason to pay out of your normal line items or capital outlay or anything like that. Discretionary funds, not when somebody else can pay for it.
Yep, absolutely.
I will, John, that's a great question. I will attempt to do that because, here we go. Save chat.
Yeah,
chat
you
has
can
been
save
saved.
The chat.
There we go.
Yay.
As of right now, I saved it. I'll save it again at the end. So when at the end of here, we will definitely send everything out to you. Probably tomorrow morning is when you'll get it. So Kristen, I know that there's I think
there's only one more slide. So
there's only one more slide, right? It's just, this is why we do it, right? So
no, keep going. Yeah, that's it. So we're good.
What a really good conversation we've had today. Like a lot of good questions. I really loved it. And I hope everybody on here got something else out of it. I want to open it up to anybody that wants to chat with us. Talking, you can write it in chat. I'm going to just open the floor up. But I do want to put in case anybody wants to jump. If you have, you want to see this again, you want to share this with people. This is our YouTube channel. All of these get uploaded to YouTube every week. And so all of our video series, last spring, the fall, all of our testimonials, everything is on our YouTube channel. And then if you want to find out more about what's coming up and what we're doing, what we're all about, that's our Gaming Concepts website. Everything can be found on there, as well as that blog that I shared earlier. So yeah, so if anybody wants to, we're going to open it up to questions. If anybody wants to
I
ask
went a little
anything.
longer than 45 minutes. Sorry about that.
You did good. It's right at 5:30. So I just want to be
Okay.
respectful of people's time. If you want to go, we so appreciate you guys being on here.
Yes.
Thank you so much. You will hear from us tomorrow. And if you want to stay, I'm good. So we can chat as long as you want. My wife will be home for a little bit longer. So
very nice.
all
Thank
right,
you guys
so
for coming. We appreciate it.
thank you so much, everybody. So if you want to stay, please. And we can chat. And if you've got to jump, we totally understand.